Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So good to be here. How is the sound back there? Doryu, Irene, got it? Okay, give me a little if my voice gets too soft. I just want to begin with a notice or an acknowledging that Mushin could not be here tonight. And she is tending her family, has a new granddaughter, barely 24 hours into the world, who's also in intensive care right now. And so please join me in extending love and support for little Pascal, who is just new to this human life that has so many unpredictable twists and turns. She is held in the family with great love, and so Mushin is there at home, and we'll soon be traveling in a little over a week to visit. But I also want to say something about the moment. I know as a teacher that when something happens in my own life and students or Sangha says, what can we do? I say, please take care of the Sangha. And so it means, I will just guess, knowing Mushin so well, that it means so much that people come and sit and that you all hold the space with such maturity and care. And that frees up the teacher to tend whatever is needed. So it's a powerful time for this Sangha as everyone steps in and fully inhabits and welcomes people to the Dharma. So I'm aware my talk tonight's about ghosts. And some of you in the room last night, right about this time, were circled around at the empty field Zendo, beginning our traditional Sajiki ceremony, which means Festival of the Hungry Ghosts, the feeding of ghosts. And it was a very beautiful and powerful evening. So I want to reflect a little bit about some of the gems, some of the wisdom that came with our practice together in the afternoon, because Mushin and I noted how perfect it was that when we gather together and practice, whatever arrives is just perfect, just perfect. There is a koan that some of you may or may not have heard of. It's a warm-up koan, an odd one, and it's just 3 words. It's save a ghost. Save a ghost. Well, that's an interesting koan. That doesn't sound like the usual, what was your face before your parents were born? It surprised me when I heard it as well. What I love about that koan is if you take it on, there's no supports about it. There's no story, no exchange between teacher and student. You have to sit with that, save a ghost. Or some people say free a ghost, and see what arrives. You have to, in a koan like that, start with your own direct experience, because there's nothing there except those 3 words. For some people, a ghost for them is really a felt presence of someone there. I'm not wired well in that way, so I admire those who have a sensibility about that kind of disembodied energy. After my mother died, my older sister, Diana, slept in the room in which she had died that day. I wouldn't have done that. My sister said, oh, there's a bed there, I'll just sleep there. So I was a little nervous. And in the night, the ghost of my mother arrived. And my sister, who is very not woo-woo, said she saw her rise up and then sink down into the mattress and disappear, as if she was right in the room. So some of us have those experiences, and I'm a bit agnostic. I say, okay, there are many, many psychic realms we know nothing about. But for most of us, the ghosts also take on a kind of more wispy presence in our life. In our dreams, for instance, or when we're just falling off to sleep, there's that felt sense of something or someone. So it's important to investigate for oneself, what is a ghost? A ghost to me is something wanting. something lost, an energy that's disembodied, that does not know what it is, something restless, something hungry or angry, some energy in a bardo state, neither here nor there. So as we investigate this Seido ghost, it becomes very interesting to notice what inside of us fits that description. As I was putting some notes together for this talk this morning, I came upon, in my memory, one of my favorite koans that I have not pulled out in a few years. And it is out of the Mumon Kon, which is the first collection of classical koans. And it's called Chien and Her Soul Are Separated. Is anyone familiar with that koan? Do you know that one, Debra? Yeah. It's a very unusual, similar to Seido Ghost, very unusual koan. Again, does not have a teacher-student exchange. It has a story, an old Chinese story, and it goes like this. And it tells us something about ghost energy. So I am gonna come back to our Sajiki ceremony at the end. So here's how the story goes. That's the beginning of the koan. A long time ago, in the olden days, there was the proverbial beautiful young woman, young child. And she had a male playmate. And as they grew up together, they fell in love, and they pledged to each other that they would marry. Right? But of course, this does not come to pass. The father decides that young Chien would be better matched to a wealthy patron in the community. So Chien is very torn. Her father, as would dictates the laws in that area at the time, she wants to honor her father's request, or demand, as it would be. But she also is in love with this young man. And so one night, before that, she does decide to marry the one that her father says she should marry. And so the young man, forlorn, her playmate, goes off in a boat and is loading the boat and traveling along the river, leaving the community. And he looks to the side of the shore, and there is Chien running alongside saying, "Wait, wait." And he stops, so surprised, and he says, "Get in." And so she gets in, and they go off. And they live together. They raise a family. Years pass. They're happy, but something is not quite right for Chien. And she says 7 years later, one day, to her husband, "I need to go back. There's something undone. I left my father. I broke a vow to him, and I feel incomplete. Need to return." And so her husband says to her, "I'll help you. We'll both go back." So they get in the boat, and they go down the river back to the community that they hadn't been in 7 years. And the husband goes first up to meet the father, and the father welcomes this young man wholeheartedly. And the young man's curious, like, "I just stole your daughter. I wonder why are you embracing me so much?" And he asks the father, "Chien and I have come to make peace with you." And the father says, "What are you talking about? Chien is up in the house, in bed. In fact, ever since you left, she's been lying in bed. She cannot speak, but she understands." And the husband says, "Oh, this isn't possible." And they go up and see. There she is, lying there, pale, ghost-like, alive, but mute. So the husband tells the father, no, Chien's in the boat, and goes down to get Chien to solve this problem. And Chien starts walking up from the boat, and right at that moment, the Chien that was bedridden stands up and is walking towards her, and they walk towards each other until they meld and they become one. That is the Chinese tale. It's the Chinese tale. The koan for Chien and Her Soul Are Separated, the koan says, which is the real Chien? Is the real Chien the one who went off with the husband? Is the real Chien the one lying in bed? Or is the real Chien the together Chien? So I'm not going there, but I'm just giving you that question. You can take that home. What I'm interested in is the way that this koan brings forth the truth, the truth of a disembodied life, the paths not taken. While the one is off living a practical life, raising a family, some part of Qian was lying forlorn and depressed in bed alongside. I think it's a beautiful expression of the origin of ghosts, the disturbances that part situations. And the Sejiki ceremony that we performed was intended, or is intended, in one ceremony to invite all of the disturbed energy, all of the unlived life, all of the pains and guilts and shames into one space at one time to seek resolve, to feed these hungry ghosts. So I want to return to this Sejiki practice yesterday. In this ceremony that is so wise, we invite all of this into a space of collective love that is equally joyous and somber, an equal measure of joy and seriousness. And it's a boundaried space that allows us collectively as practitioners to look to what we fear, to look at directly what we fear. The ceremony, for those who are part of this, invites all Buddhas to be present as helpers and all Bodhisattvas to be present as help. In the Sejiki ceremony, these ghosts are fed food that they recognize as a measure of kindness. They are given candy because it's said in their mythological being they cannot take in real food that is nourishing. And mostly they cannot take in the Dharma, the truth of our interdependence, the truth of who they really are. So there's a lot of wisdom in this ceremony. And the food is offered without any attachment to outcome. There are boundaries in which the gaki, or the ghosts, are invited in. They are fed and then they are set free. They're set free to return to their karmic path, which sometimes we cannot change for another. So one of the exercises, I was at a Sejiki ceremony many years ago early in my practice, and I was surprised. It was a whole weekend retreat, actually, sitting on the cushion, and I'm not sure what directives were given to us. Kyogen used to like to, my teacher, used to like to lead us in some remembrances of the past, just a little meditation. And what arrived for me was an unresolved piece of karma that was like 15 years old. I was so surprised. My thoughts were not on this at all, a choice I'd made. And I went to my teacher. I was so distressed because it was a huge flush of emotion, overwhelm. And I'm sitting there on the cushion in a big retreat with this, and I felt very distressed, and I went to my teacher. And he said, "Why don't you write this person a letter and then burn it?" And the burning in Chinese understanding is not destroying the letter, it's actually transforming it so that it's received by the one who has died, right? Or it's received. So fire in this condition is a form of purification and transformation to send out this energy. And I did do that, and it was really an important process for me. It changed everything. My teacher was wise in that way. So we did this yesterday. Some of us who were there sat, and to invite the hungry ghosts in from whatever direction they come, everyone was offered to write a letter, or 2 or 3, to someone, a group of people, living or dead, in which we're ready to have some release It's a really wonderful practice that I really recommend for anybody who's ready. We have to be a little bit ready, though, to be able to say the things we need to say, whether that's sorry or this is how it was for me. No defending, no judging, but a connection of the humanity often of two individuals. So often that offers a shift, and so we came back to talk about it, and I want to go into the three things that were said that were just a remarkable formula for how to feed a hungry ghost. They were offered yesterday. The first one is someone said something which was very accurate for many people, said, if I can remember or comment accurately, she said, I had a really hard time with this letter writing because it brought up so much strong emotion, and uncomfortable. She was just settling down. And then to turn towards something that is disturbing was difficult. And she used the word, it felt like things were really just going sideways. It was such a beautiful term. And Mushin, who was next to me at the time, said, just out of the blue, poetry is about things going sideways. All poetry. I thought that was really beautiful. It's true. And my response to this person was, yes, this is such an essential teaching of our practice that we develop what's called a vertical dimension of practice that is our samadhi, solid, like a tree, deeply rooted. That's our zazen practice, the depth of samadhi. But the purpose is not to stay there. The purpose of our samadhi is to act beneficially in the world. So the deeper the samadhi, the more we can lean outward, just like a tree. The deeper I am rooted, the more I can move towards what's disturbing without losing my center. So helpful. And we're each in charge of that regulation. I know for me, I'll often just say, I need a sesshin. Okay? I need more zazen. I see it, I'm too far, I'm off my center. I'm not responding from that root. And over time, we can trust our practice to give us that information. So the first person opened up a beautiful dharma about how to feed a hungry ghost, which is step one, to be deeply rooted in samadhi, in presence, and turn towards them. So there was nothing wrong with the disturbance as much as it is welcoming. At some point we have to welcome what we fear, or we do not change. There's no transformation. But we don't have to, we sometimes do not know how strong we actually are. And the important part of the ceremony yesterday was that everyone was supporting each other, that no one was alone in doing this, that we had the root of our practice deep in samadhi. So the second person, let me see where I am in my notes. The second person that brought some wisdom forth was, again, these are all the difficulties of the practice, but that's where the wisdom is. Said, I had a difficult time because a lot of judgment came up. I don't want to do this. Why would I want to turn towards this? Because it feels like I'm involved in, it's my fault. There's blame. And of course, that's so understandable, right? If we go back into relational pieces of life, it's easy for that inner critic to just take over and want to part and sort whose fault was what, who did what, who's right and wrong. And so the response, the dharma there is, because we're really talking about karma here, is that karma is not that something is your fault. It's your responsibility. That's a huge shift. A fault is about blame, finding some cause, some one person to point it in. Responsibility is an embrace of one's karma. It's my responsibility. And that's an honor that has energy with it to respond. So, deep in samadhi, feeding these hungry ghosts, the second step is to release all blame. To release all blame. As we proceed, the ghosts are already shrinking back to size because there's a strength in those two motions. And the last one, the last wisdom that came forward from the group, of course there were many other comments, was about, see if I can get this right. As we were talking about this, it seemed like we were suggesting that ghosts are freed or pushed away or said, be off with you. But there is a pull actually to be closer, to be more intimate. And the brilliance of this is actually when we free a ghost out of the jail of our own mind, we actually do get closer. Because then this energy can start taking life in the bodies and in the world and move and change. So many of the ghosts of the past in our own minds are kept in a kind of jail. It's our way of protecting ourselves. That if we have resentments and hurts, those our ideas of those beings are locked in. So they can't hurt us, but actually when we see that, it's us who are harmed. It's our prison. So there's a lot of wisdom in the practice of freeing up that person from the prison in our minds. And then when they're freed and become whole, then we can navigate and say yes or no freely. So a discussion ensued about boundaries. That boundaries are essential in this practice. Boundaries are simply the capacity to freely say yes or no, depending upon the circumstances, in a way that serves life. Capacity to say yes or no at any one moment, in ways perhaps we didn't know we could at one time in the past. So the third step in feeding your hungry ghost is to open the prison door and be ready to step forward and respond as you're so called. In this way, this koan brings us back to a kind of beautiful truth that if we do discover how to free a ghost or save a ghost, we won't know who's freeing who. Who's freeing who? And I'll just end with, that was my experience this morning as I had written my own letters to various people that popped up without any forethought about that at Sujiki. And that I felt in my body the unclenching in subtle areas, waking up clean and free and at peace. And that has something to do with our collective space that is very hard to reproduce alone. Very hard to reproduce alone. So I thank everybody for wholehearted Sujiki ghost feeding yesterday. And those of you whose words I hope I did not mangle too much, thank you for lending your wisdom to the day. And very good to be here.
Please turn to page 5.